Join me today as I make some comfort food from scratch. This is some hearty country cooking. We're going to be making beef and noodles, homemade mashed potatoes, and some steamed frozen vegetables. I'm glad you're here. My name's Leanne. You're at Outdoors and Country Living. We do have a partnership with Nakano knives. They offer some really nice olive wood handled knives. This is their chef knife. So be sure to check out their website at nakanoknives.com/outdoors and country living. We do have a 10% discount code if you're interested in purchasing any knives from them. We're going to be making this beef and noodles in this cast iron enamel coated pot today on the stovetop. So here's the discount code for 10% off. If you go to nakanoknives.com and use Outdoors and Country Living, that'll get you a 10% discount on any purchases. This is our favorite roast to use for beef and noodles. So here's the cast iron enamel coated pot I'm going to be using on the stovetop to cook this. We're going to add some oil just to cover the bottom basically. I'm using avocado oil, but you can use whatever oil you like to cook with. We're going to heat that up and we're going to sear our roast on each side to lock in juices and flavor. So we like the Black Angus sirloin tip roast. I get this from Aldi. It's very good roast. So it had some netting on it. I've taken that netting off before we're going to cook it. You can just see the lines here where it was. I'm just doing salt and pepper to taste. My from scratch cooking doesn't involve a lot of fancy spices or ingredients. The salt helps tenderize the meat. The pepper adds good flavor. You can either omit it or add it, depending on your preferences. So this is over a medium heat. I'm just searing each side of this roast, loosening it up so it doesn't stick to my pan. Flip it over, do the other side. I'm kind of an old school cook. I don't like a lot of fancy kitchen gadgets. Just give me a pot and a stove and I'm happy. I'm just adding salt and pepper to this other side of the roast. I'm going to be using this broth base, basically a bouillon powder. I'm adding 4 teaspoons. 4 teaspoons. Ooh, 4 tablespoons would be a bit much. 4 teaspoons of the bouillon powder. And then we're going to be adding water. I usually add it to about 3/4 of the way up on the roast. We're going to bring this to a boil. Once we're at a boil, then I'm going to reduce the heat to about low and let it cook until it's tender. This one took about 2.5 hours to do that. That's going to vary depending on the size of your roast. Now we're going to prepare our homegrown potatoes for our homemade mashed potatoes. I'm going to use this Nakano chef knife. I really like this knife. It's very sharp right out of the box. It is a very nice chef knife. I've used a lot over the years. 28 years of home cooking. I like this one. Nice olive wood handle. Keep it oiled, it'll last you many, many years. So I like to just chunk my potatoes. I am not peeling potatoes for mashed potatoes. These are our homegrown potatoes. There's nothing on them, no pesticides, no sprays, no nothing like that. You can peel them if you want, but we like to leave the skin on. The amount of potatoes you use is going to depend upon how many people you're feeding. I honestly don't know how many pounds this is. I just eyeball it. I'm not making a very large pot, so once you get them all cubed up, I add water to cover. Those are ready. We'll eventually cook these. Let's go back to that roast and check on it. Got the roast here on the left. It's still cooking. It's on low, believe it or not, but it does keep it at a low boil. I have a gas stove. See how tender this is. Oh yeah, look at that. Starting to break apart. So I'm just gonna break it into sections to let it finish tenderizing. Carefully break those pieces apart. And we're gonna let that continue to simmer on the stove while we prepare other things. I'm gonna be making a homemade apple crisp. These are apples from our apple trees. I'm just peeling them a little bit, coring them, and this slices it too. I do some rustic cooking here, nothing too fancy. I'm just placing them in a bowl. Nothing better than some beef and noodles, mashed potatoes, vegetables, and a homemade apple crisp for a little bit of comfort food. This is not how we eat all the time, but occasionally we have a delicious meal. So here I've got all my apples done. I cut each apple in half to make it a little more manageable. I'm using another cast iron piece. We're just going to cook these apples down in butter. This is real butter. I'm going to melt that, add your apples. Let those cook down a little bit. Get the juices flowing. Here they're cooking nicely. A little bit of brown sugar to taste. Maybe a fourth to a half a cup. Adding some cinnamon to taste. Just some ground cinnamon, however much you like. Apples are all cooked down, so I've turned the heat off. Just going to let those sit there while we prepare the topping. I have 2 sticks of butter, a cup of flour, a cup of brown sugar, 2 cups of oats, some cinnamon. Make sure your butter is softened. I'm just going to mix that together with a hand mixer until it starts to come together. Sometimes I add vanilla extract or almond extract to the topping. With some vanilla extract I added there, just to taste, maybe a tablespoon or 2. We're going to put that crumb topping right on top of our apples. Then we're going to bake this at 350 until the topping is crunchy. While that's baking, we're going to go back to the potatoes. Those are cooking on medium-low. Make sure they don't foam over. As here, I'm just blowing on it to decrease the foam. I'm going to let those boil and cook down. I have a little helper with me today. Our granddaughter. She helps me in the kitchen a lot. No better way to teach the next generation how to cook from scratch with love. Potatoes should be about done. Let's see if they're fork tender. And they are. So I'm going to turn the heat off, and we're going to drain these potatoes in the sink in a strainer. I run cold water so the boiling water isn't harsh on the pipes. Let those drain. We'll add them back to our pot that we cooked them in. And we're going to start mashing them. I'm just using an old school hand potato masher. Mash them up a little bit. Then we're going to add some butter and some milk. This is all just to get your potatoes to the consistency that you like. It's going to vary depending on how many potatoes you're preparing as well. You can add a little bit of salt. Oh, need a little bit more milk. I don't really measure, I just add it until it's to my liking. In goes the salt, about a teaspoon. Mix that in, and the potatoes are done. Let's cover those and set those aside. Keep them hot. Back to the beef. It is nice and tender now. It has really come apart. It smells so good. I wish you could smell this. This is 16 ounces of egg noodles. Yes, I did buy these from the store. I have made homemade noodles before, but today I needed a little convenience. We're just going to let these cook down until they're softened, about 15 or 20 minutes, I would say. Put the lid on, that'll help them soften. Apple crisp is done, hot out of the oven. You can see the crumb topping has crisped up. It's nice and crunchy. That smells so good too. We've got our beef and noodles here on the stove, finishing up. The noodles have softened. I've got some frozen vegetables in here that I'm steaming. The lid to my pot broke several years ago, so I just used some aluminum foil. The potatoes are in the back, keeping warm. Those frozen vegetables make me feel like I'm cheating. It's a one convenience item that I sometimes use to prepare meals. So our beef and noodles are ready. The noodles help thicken up that broth as they sit and soften. Yum! Who doesn't like beef and noodles? Everything's done. Everyone in my household is hovering in the kitchen, waiting for this delicious meal. So I'm just showing you here, everything's ready. There's the vegetables, the potatoes, the beef and noodles, and our dessert. Cooking from scratch is not difficult. You don't have to have a lot of fancy equipment, a lot of fancy ingredients. Keep it simple. Supper's ready. And here's the final touch, dessert. After everyone has finished their meal, I'm serving up a little bit of dessert. Homemade apple crisp. Homegrown apples. Homemade topping. If this isn't comforting and warming, I don't know what would be. I appreciate you sticking around and watching me cook from scratch this hearty country comfort food meal for my family who enjoyed it so much. I hope you come back for more. We'll see you next time. God bless.